if you want to approve Chris's presentation as he has presented it. If you're not going to approve it, if you want to counter, then we can get, we'll get Rick McConnell involved and so he can do his part if you want to come back with something else for him. So just kind of get us a direction as to what the board wants to see on the next agenda.
Did we hear from the county?
He basically still did what everything he voiced before. He did get a little more clarity regarding the, you know, after Rick McConnell had answered some of the questions. But otherwise, I've not heard back from him at all.
Okay, because in the minutes here, he had said that the abatement was valued. Well, he wanted $4 million. It should be $4 million instead of 3, and he was in favor of a 10-year abatement rather than 15.
And I can tell you, Doug expressed that to me when he called to let me know that he was not going to be able to be at the meeting tonight. I didn't personally talk to Jerome, so I don't know which way he's leaning, but Doug was the same with the 10-year.
Okay, is that what he was in favor of? Because that's what I'm in favor of right there.
If it's going to go through, that was my understanding, is that Tom would be leaning more towards the 10-year. He was not in favor of the extension.
But the value of the property really doesn't have any material factor, Sharon, in regard to whether we vote for or against it. It's going to appraise for whatever appraised is for. If it appraises for $4 million, 10 years from now, if whatever we vote for, they'll pay tax on $10 million. If it does $3 million, they'll pay tax on $3 million. So, I mean, they're not going to get any value whether it's $3 million or $4 million until down the line.
You might have been
The only thing I can think of is because when Tom Wright was talking about wanting to be, they figured it at like 2.95 as opposed to $4 million. In a TIF scenario, you can get bonds on the amount, and
Yeah, we're not selling anything.
So this is an abatement as opposed to a
But the
credit.
guy answered the question the other night, that you get no bonds to sell.
Yes.
It's just like you get a credit at the end of the year that you don't have to pay the taxes.
I
It's
think
all
you may have been
Yeah,
confusing
yeah.
this mechanism with something else.
Yeah, I
It's
think
not-
he was.
There's no debate about what it would be once the taxes are reinstated.
It's not an important factor on our vote, whether it's $3 million or $4 million, really.
Okay, well, I'm glad you clarified that. I was just asking since that was a question that he was concerned about, or seemed to be concerned about. So that obviously would be out of the question, and it's just simply whether or not it's 10 or 15 years. And I would be in favor of 10.
My consensus is I'm in favor of the 10 years because you were promised that to begin with by Bright Bruce's administration. The 15, from what I discovered, was never discussed up until you made this proposal. I'm kind of willing to still go with what was promised in your original discussion with Bruce's administration.
The original discussion was at 10 at 100 and 10 at 50.
What's that?
It was 10 at 100% and 10 at 50, because the length of the term of an EEZ is only 20 years, as opposed to 25.
It was never just 10 years.
So,
Well, the additional is an option. It's not a requirement. You don't have to go one way or another. The additional past 10 years is an option. In all of our paperwork, nowhere have I been able to find anything regarding any previous discussion with a 353. I had to get a hold of the state to get their paperwork that they had regarding the EEZ, which the board at that point did approve the EEZ, which is 50% at 10 years. And that is what, that's even what Matt had with the school board. The letter was 10 years at 50%. His proposal with the 353 came in since I've been there, and that's the only paperwork we have on that. And so he did the 10 years at 100% and then has asked to extend it to 15 years at 50%. So that is just his proposal. The board can choose that, or they can, if you're all leaning towards the 10 years, then we can counter that back and have Rick McConnell go ahead and draft that up and then present that to Chris and have it on the agenda next time.
And the 10 and 50% is the minimum of an EEZ.
Right.
The maximum is 20 at 100%. And the discussion with the prior administration, who was on all 3 items for the EEZ, was a 10-year at 100 and 10 years at 50.
10 years at 0.
10 years at, well, 10 years at 100% abatement, and then 10 years at 0 for a 20-year period, setting it close to 353. So that was the original discussion when we came into talking to former Mayor Bly.
And I'd just like to add one thing. Just being very human here, the way that I would want you to think about this would be to say, welcome to Eldon, pick out a house, commit to moving into it, then we'll tell you how much it costs later, after you've closed. So a developer who chooses to start a business or a construction project in a certain city is told something in a handshake and some paperwork is begun by the city's administration at that time, then that's your understanding. You would not proceed with a project in a given parcel in a given city if you don't know the setup, if you don't know the framework that it's in. So nobody would come to build or start a business if it's optional down the line. So what I'm saying is, us or a future company that might want to start a business, if an administration has told you it's one set of circumstances over multiple, this is our understanding, over multiple conversations, multiple meetings with our bank lenders in person, and that this was the handshake, absolute understood arrangement, that's what we counted on. So that's what all of our entire framework for this project is based on, is 10 years at no property tax additional than what we're already paying, and then 10 years at the 50%, and then full, at that point. That's when it was the original EEZ arrangement. Then when, a clerical error, found that that's not the proper mechanism, we just don't feel that it should undo and just reopen the entire thing to a random discussion of what we feel like giving later. It's that a project is formulated and we calculate what we as a family can do. We might have chosen another city, another time, another place if we thought that this deal could just be upended and completely changed. So that's just the very human situation we find ourselves in. So we just don't want to come to town, choose a house, and then later be told how much it costs. It's hard. It's a hard way to plan your business.
Well, as they pointed out, the attorney even pointed out at the last meeting, typically this is done prior to construction.
Right,
And so
it was our understanding that it was.
Well, the only, everything has to be done by ordinance, and the only ordinance we have on the enhanced enterprise zone is 10 years at 50%. That's the only ordinance that is in place. And so whatever happened back in those discussions, unfortunately, boards change, and so we didn't have any of that paperwork. And so all I was able to receive was later that the board at that time did go ahead and agree to include health, which is not, which the state does not recognize, but the only ordinance we have does say 50% under the enhanced enterprise zone. Nowhere in our minutes could I find any discussion regarding a Chapter 353 prior, in previous years. The only discussion I have found was since it was presented. I totally get where you're coming from. I'm just trying to explain to you where we're coming from administratively. And so then what the board has at this point is your presentation that you'd like to have. And so then with the enhanced enterprise zone already in our ordinance is the 10 years, 50%. And now now they choose whether they want to go with what you have presented, or they can counter with you, or then the other alternative is the 10 years, 50% under the enhanced enterprise zone. So I just wanted to clarify that for you because we didn't have any paperwork at all. Chris shared with me some of his paperwork, and then I got some from the state, and then what our ordinances and minutes are is all we can go by.
Yeah, and then the ordinance that you're speaking of is from the 2006 ordinance, is that correct?
Correct.
That's the only one. And I know in my conversations with the economic development at the state level, trying to get some clarity on what we have negotiated was each individual enhanced enterprise zone is self-governed, so the state doesn't get involved. So there's just the ambiguity that, we're trying to iron things out through the 353.
Well, I see their point, and I think they're totally right. We have one bed and breakfast here in town that never got to be a bed and breakfast, and that young couple spent a fortune fixing that house up with the understanding from the council that it was going to be approved, and it would be okay for them to have dinner parties, reception parties, and the neighbors protested it, and they had the house probably 2/3 finished, spent a small fortune for them, and they could no longer have a bed and breakfast. So if you don't have your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and it's the same way for the council. If you don't have everything in writing, nothing can really exist.
Well, that's exactly right. Actually, everything has to be done by contract, not by ordinance. So without those prerequisites being satisfied, there is no action of the council. So you have to first go through the process and have action by ordinance for it to have effect with the council, with the city.
What did the council actually vote? They only voted to allow nursing homes or healthcare to be part of the enterprise zone? Is that all they voted for?
No, there's a list that, because there has to be an enhanced enterprise zone board as well. And so the council passed, and there's a whole list of them, Larry. The key was that they added the healthcare because each individual enhanced enterprise zone entity can do that since the state, because at one point the state was in charge of it all, and then that separated, and the state didn't recognize health. So that's what is of interest to Chris, is the fact that they then included that. But the only ordinance that was ever passed was in 2006 when the board approved the enhanced enterprise zone area. And other than that, unfortunately, there's no other documentation, no other ordinances, nothing in our records that we can find anywhere. And we've been researching it since Chris came to me. So it's unfortunate because he had this understanding, but at this point, like our attorney's pointing out, the only ordinance we have is on this EEZ, and so whatever the board decides, if they decide to move forward on the 353, then that will come back as an ordinance for the 353.
So basically, the board never voted on Chris's proposal, they only voted on
That's right.
the rules
That
of
would have had to
an
be
enterprise
by
zone.
ordinance.
That would have
See,
been
I was
by
under the
ordinance.
misunderstanding that the board voted on his particular plan, they never voted on this.
Right,
particular plan.
if they had voted on it, it would be an ordinance.
That's right. Yeah, no, we never voted on it.
One other question though, whenever the enhanced enterprise zone is passed, it's my understanding that the enhanced enterprise zone is self-governed as opposed to having an ordinance done by the city, because the enhanced enterprise zone includes Miller County and Eldon. So I thought that is its own separate governing body.
But it's also still under the municipality. However, what's before the board right now is nothing.
Yeah.
A proposal for
Yeah.
for the EEZ, it's the 353. So if you want to address the EEZ, then you would want to do a proposal for the EEZ. What's
Okay.
before them now is that 353.
And I guess from a discussion standpoint, the only thing I would add is that what we were trying to get across earlier is that, you know, Matt was fully aware of the details we discussed and signed a letter to that effect. So that is somewhat evidentiary of what the discussion absolutely was. And also the two bankers from St. Louis, we could perhaps get a letter from them of an affidavit of some sort who met in person with the mayor. And I think as two first-time business owners in this region.
Now, not this mayor.
No, not you,
that's
the former mayor.
Former mayor.
Absolutely, absolutely. But what we as first-time business do, you know, holding a business in Eldon for the first time, you know, we shook hands with what we understood to be the city. So the city, as we saw it, told us, absolutely, this is what we'll do. And the head of the school board, whom it affects the most at that level, knew exactly those same details, understood them the same way, and also agreed, shook hands, and wrote a letter to that effect. So
But
that
that
is all we had to go on.
But
And so
that wasn't
just
for
letting you know.
353.
That wasn't a 353. that
Right,
was
so
the
then we were told
EEZ.
later that we needed to do it some other
Okay,
way,
so
at which we were
that's-
just kept going off what the city told us.
Because the
At
other one
different
was not
times.
available to you because you're in healthcare, is that correct?
Well, actually, it is available
It
to
is.
us because of the 2006
It
ordinance,
is
which
now?
it,
No,
It always
because the
was.
state is not involved anymore. It's its own governing entity, so the
We
state.
would have applied for the right thing had we known what it was. We were told to do it a certain way, so that's what we did.
Well, except, now Chris did come to me and say that he was going to change his mind and do the 353 because he felt it was cleaner and easier. So it really was Chris's choice to change to the 353. So if we're gonna discuss the EEZ, then we've got to come back to the board with information regarding the EEZ.
Sure, we're willing to
because
do
they're
whatever
not-
you need us to do. We just are trying to get back to the term, in whichever mechanism is appropriate, get back to the terms that Matt and the former mayor shook our hand on, and that's just what we're trying to get back to, that's all.
Okay, what terms did Matt give
Well,
you?
Matt-
Talk to you about it.
well,
Because he
Matt-
just simply said that the school board approved this now.
Well,
What I'm
15
hearing
Yours
is-
is 10 years, 50%, and they did that based on the minimum EEZ.
Matt,
Okay, 10-year, 50% is what the school board is doing?
I've spoken to Matt Davis, and he supports the 10 years at 100% and 15 years at 50%.
Yeah, but he can't necessarily determine what we decide right here.
I understand.
Right.
He's-
Okay. He can give an
He has given
opinion,
his
but-
support.
And we have other tax entities that voice their opinion on this too, and I mean, they're not allowed to vote on this. This is what we have to vote on, we do have to take their words and everything into consideration.
Okay, well, we weren't given the terms that the school had agreed to. Now, only that they had agreed to give you a break on it and so forth, and recommended that we do so as well. But until tonight, I didn't know any terms that they had agreed to. And I did not know that there was an ordinance.
Hey, can I clarify one thing?
Yeah.
I went over and looked at the school board minutes where they approved it, but they weren't able to present me with your proposal. There was no proposal as attached to the approval, so they weren't able to say one way or another what they approved. They just approved something. They can't find a proposal that they approved.
And
Matt
they-
wrote a
they-
letter to Chris that stated the board had approved a 50% at 10 years. However, it's my understanding that the board did that when they thought that he was coming in with an EEZ proposal. And so that was done in 2015. But then all the tables turned and he wasn't going to do the EEZ, so we didn't provide the board any information regarding any of that because he came to us with 353.
Well, and there was also no letter from Matt that specified at 10 years at 50%. There is they approved
Well, they,
General.
again, it's not an approval, that was just their support. So the
Okay.
school
Okay.
board
Expressing support.
doesn't get
Yeah.
to approve or
So-
disapprove.
Right.
But there's also the ambiguity of what they approve, because there's nothing that says the 10 years at 50% or the 10 at 100 and 10 at 50. It's just that they approve the tax incentive. That's my understanding. So it's,
Well, either way,
I've not
what's
seen
before
document-
them is the 353.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
what's before them, so that's what
And-
they have the decision on. If you're withdrawing that proposal, then you probably should discuss that with them. But that's all we have, they
Okay.
don't have any of the information regarding the EEZ.
Okay.
And again, we're happy to do whichever, we wouldn't have ever switched except we were told erroneous information in some way that healthcare couldn't be under the EEZ. That's why we went and engaged a firm to help us with the 353, because we thought we had to. We weren't trying to confuse the issue. We were told, uh-oh, that doesn't cover healthcare, so we went and got the 353 because it did seem to be the better fit. So now it seems like maybe, so we're happy to do whatever we need to do, it's just there's been some confusion as to what that might be. We didn't try to set out to try to confuse the issue, it just sort of got confused. So we're happy to work with the city to do whatever.
This came for you or this came for Chris, but somebody said there's actually a enterprise zone board.
There is a, yes, there is a, and I don't remember who is on it, but they are, it's just a governing kind of board, like
That was
like
appointed
a
by
planning
this,
and
by this
zoning.
body or by the Miller County.
No, they were appointed, like Tom Wright is on it, I know the mayor's on it. I don't remember who's on it, but that's all regarding the EEZ, so we didn't bring any of that to you, or that didn't go in front of any entity because of the 353.
I guess my first question, do you want to continue with the 353?
Yes.
Okay, my question, the ultimate, you want it to be for 10 years or 15,
No, and
Kids
extended
plus
50.
50.
or extended to 15?
At
Well,
50%.
what I want to know is what the amount is, what the percentage is. and so forth.
Well, you guys get to decide that. You guys can counter with that.
We don't have to worry about that.
Percentage?
If you want to do
Oh,
the
the-
10 years at 100%, or you only want to do 10 years at 50%, the board gets to decide
Yeah,
that.
but we don't decide what the value of the property is.
No,
We're just
No, I'm not
voting on-
talking about the
There,
value.
there.
Yeah, we're just saying how much tax abatement they're gonna get.
Only thing I'm saying, if we want to continue with 353, I want them to tell me how you want to handle the either 10 years, 15 years, 50%, 100%, and that. Okay?
Okay, well, if the school is going to do 50%, then I think we should do the same thing as what the
That's
school
a
does.
misunderstanding,
No.
that's a misunderstanding.
We can't vote on this yet.
Well,
Right,
also-
the school
We're not
doesn't
gonna
get a
vote on
vote.
it.
That was a
Okay.
couple years
Okay.
ago on the EEZ, just showing their
Take it
support
No
for it.
input,
And
Okay.
other than what they
No.
decide. We decide.
Regardless, Matt supports it, and
And-
that was the point of their
Well, no,
letter.
and Matt supports it with the 10 years plus the 15%. He supports the full 25-year, as he came and said 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I misunderstood this then,
Wow.
because I thought you meant 10 years and a total of 15 years,
No,
but you're saying another 15 years.
at 50%.
Yes.
Then
That's
to
really
100%.
planned,
10 years at 100%.
And Mr.
then
McConnell was saying
additional
at last
Instead of
meeting that that's
15
very
years,
typical.
50%.
So-
For 25 years.
That is the norm. It's not abnormal. 10 at 100, 15 at 50 is very typical.
Rick McConnell said that most transactions are for 10 or 15. That's what's in the minutes
Good.
from last week.
It's the 10 plus 15.
So, you know, I.
But see, I didn't understand that to be the plus.
The question was, Tom Wright put the question to, well, can't we do it for less than 10 years? And Mr. McConnell's response was, the normal is 10 or 15. It wasn't talking about the extension, it was talking about the original.
Because someone asked about doing it less than 10 years, and his response was, the normal minimum is 10 years. And it's Right, and in the minutes, as you stated, Rick McConnell stated that most transactions are for 10 or 15 years.
The original.
So,
And I guess what we're asking for here is what we need to put in a resolution to bring to the next board meeting. That's, you know, what they want to do, then come back and let them talk to you about this and see if we're going to pass the resolution of what the aldermen say. So that's what we need. You guys want to give them the 10 years, 50, and plus 15? You
Are
want
we
to give
doing,
them
are we discussing 10 years at 100%?
10? Do what?
10 years at 100%?
That's the
That's
proposal.
what
yes.
you want?
That's it. I've talked to a couple entities, and they said that they prefer the 10 years versus the 25-year total abatement process. I am more in favor of doing 10 years, or 10 years at 100% abatement versus doing the additional 50.
Larry,
That's where I'm at.
that's where I'm at.
Ron,
Yeah.
They were promised from the previous regime, whatever you want to say. I hate to be viewed as a municipality that we're against bringing in new businesses, and I don't fully agree with that. With that being said, I don't want to just go with exactly the other plan. We've got to talk more about this, and I don't know if this is the exact forum for it. There's a lot of questions, a lot of thought processes, and a lot of things I'd like to have a more, maybe closed session, anything like that.
We can't talk about it in closed session, it has to be an open, which is why we put it back on for discussion. But we can put it back on again for discussion in the next meeting if no one feels comfortable with voting on it.
what bothers me, I hear all about this coming up prior, and there's no documentation to support it.
Well, and
You understand what I'm talking about? Okay, we've been, you've been talking about things this stage before.
And that's part of the reason why we shifted to the 353, so that we would
Just
have
get it all-
everything out
Okay.
and
All right.
an open discussion.
Then we need to talk, you guys need to think about it. We'll put it back on the agenda next time, and you go through everything you need to do and look at it and see if you have the same perspective, or if you got a perspective in, Brian, and the other two board members come in, and next time we talk about it again, the following meeting, we will go with the resolution. Everybody agree? Karen?
Yep.
Larry? Gary?
Agreed.
Right.